scorched it.
Thank you, sir.
Something gets like it's right before church. It's really quiet.
Let's read that. All right, 7 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order, starting with roll call. Jane?
Here.
Bren?
Here.
Jeannie?
Here.
Steve? Here. Larry?
Here.
Stacy?
Here.
And we have our 2 student representatives as well. Notice of meeting?
The meeting was properly noticed.
Okay, I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
If you would all please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Tonight, our spotlight on learning is from Asa Clark Middle School.
All right.
Good evening. Thanks for inviting us to come share some learning that our students and teachers have engaged in. So I'm going to give just a quick introduction here, and then I'm going to turn it over to the teachers and students because you guys would much rather hear from them than you would me. So we have Joe Finn, who is a 6th grade math teacher, Ryan Surfort, who is a 6th grade social studies and science teacher, and Lauren Bartell, who is a 6th grade English language arts teacher. They brought 3 students with them, and they're going to share a project that they just recently, a couple weeks ago, got done working out with the students. So you guys can come on up.
Good evening. I'm joined by Lauren, Ryan, and then we have 3 students as well, Janelle, Avery, and Etta, who are going to do the majority of the presenting today, taking us through the project. We are here to talk about a self-care fair. The idea for which, unbeknownst to us, started in November of last year when I contracted a breakthrough case of COVID-19 that took a turn and turned into long-haul COVID. My doctors were very adamant with me that physical health is one thing, mental health is another thing. I really needed to take care of myself, so started exploring the different avenues of that. In my case, it was meditating that turned out to be my sort of silver bullet, if you will, because it helped me practice my breathing and it helped keep me sane, which is always good, especially being a teacher. Been meditating every day, so when I returned to work in January, we had a team meeting with Mrs. Bartell and Mr. Surford. We were trying to plan our next project, and the idea of mental health was fresh on my mind, so I suggested that. We decided to go with it. Lauren had the great idea of bringing in experts, which she will talk about in a little bit. Ryan had the idea of making it into an entire self-care fair, and the students really sort of took it from there, and we were off and running. So we gave them a little bit of a structure, which Ryan will talk about, and then we'll get into it.
Thanks, Joe. So the structure of the project was a design thinking process that we followed, and LAUNCH is the acronym. So L stands for looking at what you know about a topic. A stands for asking questions and kind of diving deep and looking for things you need to research. The U stands for understanding your topic fully. So that's where the kids are really pulling their research. The N is navigating their ideas. So after they've conducted their research, they kind of think about what are the next steps, how are they going to present this, because the end goal is to share it out. And I think a really well done launch project is something that you can share and it has impact outside of even like the school walls, which this project did. And then the C is the creation phase. So that's where they start creating their projects. So as you can see, there are a variety of different methods of presentation that the kids use. So we tried to encourage, some unique ideas and thoughts, and we certainly got some. And then the H stands for highlighting what you've learned. So in this case, it was the self-care fair where the kids displayed their projects and taught other students, both at Asa Clark and throughout the district. So we had some elementary school students come in, administration members came in, their parents came in. So it was a really cool project, and something that started as just kind of an idea really took off. And the girls are going to highlight some of the work they did. But it was a major success because of what the kids did, and that was the cool thing to see, is just how they took it and ran with it. So I'll let them talk about it and give you guys some information.
Before they do that, hi, thanks for having us. So we had a lot of featured guests. This project took about 5 weeks, and students some days would work together to collaborate, research, and design their boards or their activities. But we also welcomed 9 different professionals, from like doctors to trauma therapists to different types of nurses. Like a couple examples would be an anesthesia nurse named Sarah, who talked to the kids about caffeine, sugar, vaping, and the impact it had on their body. We had pediatric nurse, RN Molly Hilgard, Pewaukee graduate, talked about healthy eating and taking care of yourself. Dr. Jen Heineman, mind-body connection. So we had yoga instructors and all sorts of just visitors who just really pushed our understanding. I was so impressed by not only our students' attentive listening, but the questions that they asked and how they were able to connect to like life and our guests, and just, it was amazing. So here you've got a picture of one of our service dogs charity. It was interesting, different students seemed to really perk up on different topics depending on how connected to their lives or perhaps their research. Here we are in the gym. There were different days of physical activities. So we really wanted to help students not just learn information, but strategies that they could use in their lives. And I've had students ask, when are they coming back for more yoga? When can we do some more Pilates? And to me, that's a sign of success. So now the girls are going to start to dig into our project, and they're going to tell you a little bit about some of the topics that our 6th graders researched for the project. Come on.
Some examples of self-care topics we featured at the fair.
Hang on,
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, please introduce yourself first.
Oh, who are you?
I'm Avery Olson, and
Okay.
some examples of the self-care topics that we featured at the fair were anxiety, therapy dogs, hygiene, meditation, and sleep.
Hi, I'm Edith Powell, and some other examples of self-care topics were social media, physical exercise, growth mindset, taking care of your body, and dealing with depression.
Hi, I'm Janelle Kelly, and some other examples that we had in our fair was personality types, the effects of stress, mental illness, having pets, living life in moderation, and way more.
Now some people that we invited to our fair. We invited students, teachers, parents, and families to our fair. Teachers could come and sign up for a time slot to bring their students in, and families were welcome at any time. We invited 44 5th graders and 150 6th graders, which included anyone that wasn't working on the project.
We also invited 107th graders, 75 8th graders, and 50 elective students.
We estimate that about 425 people from our school district, plus all of the families from the kids in each Flex class came, such as parents of Mr. Surford's, Mr. Finn's, and Miss Bartel's Flex students, such as parents from Mr. Surford's, Mr. Finn's, and Mr. Bartel's Flex students. My mom, Edda's mom, Miss Bartel's daughter, Aria, Miss Stingle, Mr. Opie, and also some grandparents came as well.
Now to talk about how the self-care fair works. This was probably one of our biggest projects yet. Classes could sign up for half-hour sessions, and we used the classrooms and the breakout space to set up a gallery walk for students, teachers, and parents to walk around. Students were allowed to partner up and create a project that would be educational for any age. Students were also allowed to purchase candy and other trinkets to use as prizes. Visitors were given the chance to play a game. It often gave them a question, and if they got it correct, they got a prize.
And they didn't purchase candy, they earned it, right? After the activity.
My project was social media, and my partner was Edda. As you can see in the image, Edda and I had a TV, a poster, as well as prizes for the quiz. The big and bold visual attracted guests to come over to our station. We rewarded visitors with a prize when they answered questions correctly. We wanted prizes that somewhat coordinated with our topic. For example, we had emoji keychains to go with social media. Other smaller prizes included candies, stickers, and bouncy balls. As guests came by, we explained how social media connects to self-care, and once the people listened to our speech and read our poster, we gave them a sheet to fill out with the quiz. However many questions they got correct is the type of prize they got. That was just my project, however, Avery's was very different.
My self-care topic was simple, but yet educational to anyone that's any age. My topic was titled, "Do you have unknown anxiety?" and gave our visitors ways to know if they had symptoms or signs of the mental health condition, anxiety. Even if visitors didn't think they had the condition, everyone has experienced some type of anxiety in their lives. Even if it was temporary anxiety, our poster gave hints as to how to cope with that anxiety and what possibly to avoid that may be causing that anxiety. We started off the fair with a balloon pop game, as you'd see at the carnival or fair, just so we could give my station just that really clear, fair aspect of self-care fair. The balloons were filled with questions that the visitors could answer for a prize. The visitors would read my poster, and then they could use a pair of scissors to pop a balloon. This was a success in my opinion, but even though this portion was a success, I had faced an obstacle that I had to solve, in which was running out of the 110 balloons that I had filled. I then got a ring toss game in which visitors threw a ring at a board with hooks, and they could answer the questions that was next to the hook that they landed on. This got visitors engaged and got them learning all about self-care. My goal for my poster was that everyone came out with at least one strategy of how to calm anxiety/stress and maybe go out throughout their lives living a little bit happier and feeling better about themselves.
All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about how this project connects to our graduate profile here in Pewaukee.
This project involved a ton of skills such as researching, presenting, problem solving, and more. The project can also connect to our graduate profile. For example, with CARE. CARE was the whole point of our project. It was called the Self-Care Fair. Not only the guests, I also learned so much from this project, from researching my project, having guest speakers that are professionals on general health, and from other projects. This project has affected me personally to have better care over myself. I learned that it is important to drink lots of water and that self-care can affect people greatly.
It also worked with Connect. We connected to peers, fellow middle schoolers, professionals, teachers, parents, grandparents, and more. It was important to connect with our audience so that they will be more engaged in their learning. For example, something interactive at our station specifically was the quiz.
And then to focus on compete, I think we could easily compete with people our age in the future due to the responsibilities and other aspects of this project. Whether it's future college opportunities or future jobs, we learned a lot more about ourselves and each other throughout the project due to the sophisticated high-level topics students have selected.
All right.
All right. The takeaway I think is pretty clear, but the kids being able to identify topics that people struggle with and then do such solid research and educate themselves and educate other people about those topics and then maybe help people who are struggling with those topics, we thought was a super powerful thing. The day that the kids presented and showed all their projects, I remember talking to Mr. Pizzo, I said, this is a great day. Like, the kids have researched projects on topics that people struggle with and educated themselves and others and maybe helped other people. And we thought that was super powerful and just a great thing for the kids to experience and ourselves. So.
Not only did the project help improve student speaking skills, but it also gave students the chance, but I think students really enjoyed the level of creativity, and students were able to express how they felt about their topics. Students learned to be flexible and connect with their audience.
These projects were very creative and engaging. Everybody who came had fun. Overall, I thought the self-care fair was a great idea, and I think it would be a great thing to do again in the future.
All right, so that concludes our presentation on the self-care fair. I don't know if you guys have questions for us.
Oh, I think the board probably does. I can't help but start it just with Janelle here because was that arm there a result of self-care gone terribly wrong?
Yeah.
What's that about?
This was actually yesterday's soccer game.
Oh, so that fresh.
Yeah.
Ouch, okay. Well, you're getting exercise, so that's part of self-care, right?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Perfect.
Others? Stacy?
How many students participated in running the fair, or the tables and the presentations?
In our Black House, which is about 80 students, could partner up, and there was probably about like 50-ish posters that were in the fair, and students could just walk around and just look at all the posters and possibly win prizes.
So did all 80 participate in some way?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you.
Mr. Steve?
You spoke at the beginning around the numbers of students in various grades that were invited. Was there a strategy for who to invite? How did you select who came and who you invited to participate with you?
All right, we had actually 3 sessions on one day and then several hours the second day and then we had a lot of sessions. So we sent the invite out to teachers in our 6th grade house first to try to align that with our compatible schedule. We ended up inviting everybody to the fair, but based on where students were and what they were doing, if they had a test or if they had something else going on and teachers were not able to, then they didn't attend. So that's why we had very different numbers. And we brought over some 5th graders because we had the capacity to host them. But awesome. I was surprised that there are some things that surprised me, like how kids adapted. They made T-shirts. They problem solved as they went. But the kids just really did a great job of engaging with everybody else. And those 5th graders seemed really afraid, but they had a great time and were really good audience members.
Larry?
Juan, thank you for this presentation. It's very, very helpful to see some of the tie-ins with the graduate profile. I'm a big fan of that, by the way. But I have a couple questions for you relative to what you learned about the self-care and how did that impact your other classes, whether it's reading or your math classes. How did it help you cope or deal with what you might have been facing in your other classes that you take?
Okay, so it helped us understand how important mental health was, not only physically but also mentally. So I think, like Janelle said earlier, drinking more water you can do that any time during the day. So it was just those tiny things that affected you throughout.
I think that it also impacted how we worked in the classroom because we learned about strategies of how to take care of ourselves better, and it really helped us just focus better and just have a better work ethic in the classroom.
To add on, obviously with all the mental health and meditation, I feel like if there's a big test or something, we learn to breathe and meditate and how to calm our bodies if we're really stressed.
So we have another question, sorry about this, and I will ask them kind of in somewhat of a sequence with it. So obviously you guys learned something about yourselves in terms of how to care for yourselves and how that might help prepare you for other things that you do in school. Do you have any sense, did you do any kind of an evaluation or any connections with the other students that participated in this? Did they experience anything similar to what you experienced? And was there any feedback from the other students in terms of what they got out of the self-care presentations that you did?
So actually all of our visitors had to fill out a paper, and they had to fill out a few facts that they learned and some things that they could use in their daily life. So that's probably about the feedback that we got from it, and I think that was helpful.
They each, most of the visitors that came, they carried around a paper on a clipboard and it had a list of 3 facts that you learned and what topics stood out to you, and they would jot it down, and then we obviously got the feedback after and looked it over.
And part of any project is really reflecting on what went well, what would we change, what would we do for next time, and having that authentic audience of parents, grandparents, and students. It's very, very powerful, and we did a lot of things right, but still we would probably narrow who we invited. It was a lot. The students on one of our segments, we were presenting for 3.25 hours, and by hour 2 they're like, we can't stand anymore, we can't talk anymore. Don't be a teacher. So it was a really good experience for students to engage and push themselves, and I was really proud of the adjustments students made on the fly. I mean, that is a great experience. If this isn't working, well, I can tweak it this way and make it go my way. So really high quality work in this project.
Thank you for the answers to the questions that I asked. I appreciate that. But again, I think it's really, really nice example, and I'm gonna look at Danielle over there and say, Danielle, this is it. I mean, this is really helps me to understand the importance and the significance of the things that we have in terms of our graduate profile. And you guys are in 7th, 8th grade? I remember exactly. 6th, okay. So as you're there, I mean, you're helping to prepare yourselves for that next phase. I mean, next year's classes, high school and beyond. I mean, and you have to learn some of these things because you don't know it. I mean, you just don't intuitively, oh, I know how to do this. So obviously, thank you for taking the time to study it and do some research on it. And I really like the fact that you did some evaluation with your attendees, so that's pretty awesome. So thank you very much.
Anybody else with questions?
Khadijah.
Oh, Khadijah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I know in the past, like 6th grade has done like a fair type activity. I think I remember doing one in 6th grade. And I really like the fact that there's been like, the shift in focus. I think there's like a medieval fair that we did, but then also now shifting to this self-care one. I just really like that shift. Mainly because I think a lot of times when we talk about a self-care in class, it's usually, I think, just like a quick discussion in class. And although that's definitely meaningful, I think taking the steps to do such a large-scale thing can help emphasize to students that, hey, this is just as important as your schoolwork and help to show that balance. And I'm so glad that you did that within 6th grade because I can definitely see how that's going to be meaningful down the line. So thank you for doing that.
Do you have plans to do it again? Do you think you will?
I think we'd like to. Obviously, we'll tweak it a little bit so it's not the same exact thing.
Sure.
But it was a huge success, and I think it's something that has clear benefit to everybody that's part of it. So the answer to that is yes, I think.
I just want to compliment the teachers and the students. Great job on a number of fronts. One, great job using the launch cycle and taking a topic and turning it into something that was so successful. And also just wonderful work presenting here tonight. You were extremely well prepared, well spoken, articulate, very impressive. So well done. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to our student representatives for their report.
Khadijah's last final report here, so we're very excited, Khadijah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, start off with that. So I guess, starting off with our first topic of discussion, we just kind of wanted to highlight some of the great work that Insight has kind of done throughout this year. Starting with the very first one with elements of health and medicine. They've kind of included the advanced math and analytics course this year, and in addition to kind of doing bell work activities, which are really taken from New York Times, some of the graphs and data that they found on there and analyzing that in class. They've also kind of applied it to some of their Insights strand, those projects as well. So for example, as you can kind of see in that picture there, they practice calculating medicine dosages using statistics. So I think that was a really valuable thing that they were really working on practicing. And we had a chance to speak to Mrs. Bartz and her experience. This is the first time that she had kind of done this kind of collaboration with a science course, and her reflections on this were really the fact that she herself got a chance to study a new class that she hadn't studied since high school. So being able to have that collaboration was very fulfilling for the teachers as well. And for the next insight, a strand we wanted to cover was the global business and business innovation strand. They've really continued to work on connecting with businesses and nonprofits in the community, so they've continued to really work on that social media marketing and that sort of thing. But one of the biggest highlights they had this year was their case study competition with Janesville, and the thing that they were really working on was working with General Motors and trying to propose a solution in which they were put into like a tough situation in the 2008 recession. So trying to create some solutions for that organization was the main purpose of that case study competition. And another group is really working on safety and efficiency and creating solutions for the school's parking lot. So a lot of really interesting collaboration between the strands as well. And lastly, for the engineering innovations, they've worked on some products this year, as you can kind of see by the flyer up there. So that has some highlights from them as well.
So next we wanted to highlight some community outreach that is happening in our middle school through the student council. So this past month, the student council at Asa Clark Middle School has been working on a school board game drive. So starting this past week, they've been collecting board games to give to the Lakewood Alzheimer's facility. So they're collecting board games, card games, activity books, and crossword puzzles to help this facility. These can be gently used or new board games, card games, activity books, and crossword puzzles. And it's just a clear example of how, like we've featured our student councils in the past, they continue to do great work in our communities and connecting with other people in need. And then lastly, we also wanted to end with activities and salutes. So with our athletics and activities, our track team recently hosted the Waukesha County Invite, in which all track teams from Waukesha County came to our school and competed. We had 7 medalists at that event, so it was a great success not only for our team, but also from our coaching staff who were able to host this event. Our girls soccer team recently went to Burlington, Iowa to compete in the Adidas Tournament of Champions, and they defeated 2 teams from Illinois and had great success there, competing against teams from outside of our state. Our boys golf team recently competed in the Greendale Golf Invitational, and we had golfers place 2nd, 4th, and 9th against many other teams. So again, another great success. And our Science Olympiad team competed in Stevens Point on April 23rd, and there our team placed 14th in the state competition, with over 30 schools competing and over 50 teams who qualified for the state competition. And we had 1 medalist who placed 3rd in astrology.
And we'd like to end off with our salutes. We'd like to salute Zane Farah. He coordinated a volunteer event for National Honor Society, so creating more volunteer opportunities for students to really help clean up the pond and parking lot areas of our own campus. And we'd also like to thank Mrs. Bartz, Mr. Upton, and Mr. Brownwell for providing some updates about the Insight Strand.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Very good day on. Any questions for our students? And thank you for serving on this board for so long.
you.
So appreciate that. And you're going to go down in history cutting a ribbon, I'm pretty much sure.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah, well, thank you for letting me have this opportunity.
You were at the groundbreaking too, weren't you?
I think so.
With the shovel, I think,
I'm not sure, yeah.
maybe, but.
Any questions?
Excellent report, and I know Khadijah, at least, I'm not sure Musab for you, but I know Khadijah does have to go prepare for AP exams as well, so she's going to be leaving early tonight.
Letting her leave early on the last day. Okay.
Well, she'll be here at the next meeting. That was just her last report.
Right. Well, thank you for that. If there's no questions, all right, great job. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. I'm going to now go down to salutes and recognitions. Open it up to the board for any salutes or recognitions they'd like to make.
I'd like to salute our 2 student representatives. They've done a great job this year. Thank you, guys.
Fantastic. Others? Otherwise, I'll open it up to the administrative team.
I just have a general salute to our PTO and our booster club. They worked, and I'd like to salute Julie, because they all worked together to have a really great teacher and staff appreciation week last week. So lots of nice things done for our staff that was organized by those parent organizations. So heard lots of positive things. The staff was very appreciative of the support that they received.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you. Next item on the agenda is comments from citizens. Julie, do you have any pages? I do not. Okay. All right. The next item is the consent agenda. We have some minutes from a 25th meeting and some correspondence. No gifts that reached the threshold this time. So if there isn't any corrections or questions, I look for a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
7-0. I'm going to turn it over to Steve now for the Business Affairs Committee report that met earlier, right, Steve?
Yep, we did, and we went through a normal routine of looking at our check registers. Few things that members of the committee pulled out that had asked John for a little more information about. All of them were very appropriate and reasonable for expenses for the district. We looked at the revenues and expenses year to date. We're closing in on the end of the fiscal year, so it's good to see how things are stacking up against our revised budget. Things are, as John reported, we're going to be slightly over our revenue projection, so he anticipates being slightly over that, which is always a good thing to be slightly over. Still to come yet this year from revenues, some federal grants, property taxes, and of course, equalization aid that comes in later in the year. But John expects us to hit slightly over 100%. On expenses side, we are running a little high on a few things. We talked about utilities, and those expenses are very high this year. Inflation's hit us there. And then some non-tech repairs. John mentioned that he expected somewhat that we'd have some things that hit the budget this year after the major construction projects the last couple of years, things that we just found that needed to be cleaned up and addressed as part of that work that was covered under our major campus work in the past 2 years. So everything looks like it's going to be on track to have a successful budget, slightly over on revenues, and managing our expenses to make sure that we hit our targets. We then went into the 2022-23 budget proposal and talked about a number of areas. John's working very closely with Anthony as there is growth, as you saw, in the special education space, to make sure that we have good strategies for how we're handling staffing in that area, as that is one of the biggest challenges from a staffing perspective, is to get the resources to support those students. We did some conversation around what aid changes we might expect in the future. We spent some time looking at some of the historic rates of student aid that's passed either as a revenue limit increase or as a direct per pupil aid. So we spent some time talking about that and what that's been historically in the state. And then we talked and switched over and moved into just conversation around a few of the summer projects, including the roof work that's being done here in the high school and the work that's being done in the kitchen. John gave us an update on some finding of some savings that were being done in that project. So actually it's going to cost us less than what we expected and what we approved in our last meeting. And then we talked about some of the student involvement in the gym floor project for the high school and how that's being redone and changing some of the appearance of that and how students got a voice in that design, which was pretty neat. So all submitted to you for your approval, and a very thorough conversation around those topics today.
I can't help but ask, how did anything become less for like the roofing project? Because
It was
everything's going up.
It was the venting project, right, for the new range hoods.
Oh, the venting.
Yeah,
I got that.
You
Okay.
heard that, I think last time they were looking at the possibility, and the architect and the engineer have now figured out how to make it work together, and so we don't have to create new space.
Yep, I got it. I
So
know
that's a
that
good
was
thing.
it.
Yeah,
Okay,
you were
thanks.
aware of that one.
Yeah, so, are there any questions for the committee? If not, I'll look for a motion to accept the Business Affairs Committee's report.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, signal by saying aye.
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 All opposed? 7-0. All right, now we come down to old business. We talked about this last time. I'm going to turn over to John for any questions you might have on the budget.
So yeah, at the last meeting, we did a presentation of the preliminary operating budget for the fiscal year 22-23. Walked through all of the projected expenditures, staffing plan, revenues, where we anticipated the year to fall. Just a reminder that at this point of the year, this is a budget proposal. If we could lock in the student population that we had in the second week of January and make sure that's what we were going to have in September, I would say this is the final budget that we're going to go through, but we will go through revisions and hiring and make our modifications, but we're confident that the plan that we put in place will be enough to meet the needs of the district moving into next year. So, any questions?
Maybe just more of a comment. I happened to drive through a couple of our new subdivisions, the Swan one. I mean, there's a lot of houses going up in that area in terms of stuff, and so I know it's hard to predict what the family move-in's gonna be, but, you know, fingers crossed. I mean, hopefully we can accommodate whatever is moving in there, because I can't remember, I mean, it was like 15, because the Parade of Homes is gonna be there, so it's like 15 or 20 brand new houses are gonna go in there, so.
Yeah, that full development is 84 home sites, I believe, when it's all done. We've seen students out of there already. Gauge that by the calls from the bus company, because the contractors are parking on both sides of the road and you can't get buses through. But so we're getting quite a few students out of that development already, and we're anticipating by fall. The construction, as it's proceeding right now, will provide us additional students to hit the benchmarks for enrollment that we predicted.
So with that, I'll move to approve the budget and staffing plan for the 2022-2023 school year as presented.
Second.
All in favor, signal by saying aye.
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 All opposed? 7-0. That brings us down to new business. We have the updates to the English Language Arts curriculum. Turn it over to Daniel.
All right, so thank you. Yes, so we are here tonight, and I say we because the first two rows of our audience is made up of some of the team members from our English Language Arts team, and you'll hear from Robin, Wilson, and Dave Zindler specifically tonight, but we do have our coaches and a representative from at least each building with us tonight in case there's any questions specific to a school. Our team can address that, but our focus tonight is to present the curriculum review and revisions that have been going on for almost 2 years now to our English Language Arts department so that you have the information needed to review the curriculum that has already been sent to you, but it'll take a while. It's 606 pages if you didn't do the math on all the reports, so that you can take action at the next meeting. So you still have plenty of time to review it, but we wanted to make sure we highlighted some of those features for you tonight. So again, these are the members of the English Language Arts team over the last couple of years. It's been a team that has been working diligently to make sure that we have a good, robust curriculum in this area. So what I want to start with is just a review of the research findings, and this was presented and published out on our website last fall as part of our Phase 1 report. But when we looked at the research, which is really the starting foundation of all curriculum reviews, we found that our curriculum review process needs to make sure that we're aligned to the state standards that were released in 2020. So the state moved away from Common Core in 2020 and adopted new state standards, which you'll, for those of you that were on the board, you'll remember that we did adopt these in last summer through part of our normal standard adoption process. But this review process really allowed us to make sure we were aligned to those standards appropriately, because standardized assessments, specifically the forward, which is taken in grades 3 through 8 and 10, will be aligned to these state standards starting in spring of 2023. So this review cycle hit at a really good time for us with that. And I'll highlight some of the features of the standards that we're focusing on in just a little bit. We also saw in the research that students need to have access to a lot of resources from a lot of different places. So we brought tonight for you, just for an example, one of our kindergarten book bins. So all of our students in their classrooms have book bins, K through 8 really, K through 5 especially. And inside each of their book bins, they have, poor Connor's book bin here, I'm gonna destroy. They have all of the books that they're currently working on reading. So this is a kindergartner's book bin. There's 12 different books. As you can see, they're on multiple different topics, and Connor will be able to get through these books pretty quickly. As you can see, they're pretty small, and so we need to have a lot of them because every few days to every few weeks, depending on the age of the students, these students will have worked their way through those books and the skills that they're working on, which they track, and we need to continually refresh those. As you can imagine, a book like this also gets destroyed really easily when in the hands of a 5-year-old or an 11-year-old, as it were, and so we also have a lot of damage that just, you know, you gotta recycle, you gotta cycle through the books and continually stay fresh with those. So you'll see that as a piece of our budget item when we get to that place tonight. The research also affirmed and supported our K-12 workshop practices that have been in place since the last few curriculum renewals. And so one of the areas, though, that while the workshop practices were affirmed, that we did see definitely was a need for, was an increased focus on phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, phonics, and vocabulary. So which brings me to a good point, is that all of you on your tables tonight have a little glossary of terms, right? We are notorious for a whole lot of education jargon, and we can't really necessarily sometimes say things in a different way, but we can help you understand them better and what that all means. But basically, the focus on phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, and phonics, which you will see over and over again in this presentation, is really making sure that students understand the foundations of reading, of language development, of spelling, and of vocabulary acquisition. And so that is a focus that we really spent a lot of time on in this curriculum review process to make sure that we were tight on. And so some of our...
Could you say that?
Siri doesn't understand the words either. So that was one of the refinements you'll hear us talk about in the workshop model. The workshop model, though, is hugely successful for us because it allows us to personalize the learning for every child. So that really fits into our personalized learning guidelines that we've had as a district, and that focus that we've had. Students have a lot of choice in their ELA curriculum, and so that allows them to experience things that are more authentic and relevant to them, always grounded in our standards-based environment, ultimately leading to that creation of future-ready students with our graduate profile. And I think you saw a great example tonight of how students, right, are infusing our graduate profile into our school systems, but we have lots of great examples happening specifically in our English classrooms as well. We've had a number of students who've now become published into different periodicals and different places. We've had a ton of guest authors come in and present to our students. You saw a great example tonight of public speaking, which speaking obviously is a core area that we work to develop in our curriculum in English as well. Some of you may remember that last spring, for example, there was a poetry walk out on our trail, right? So we had worked on doing some things in our nature trail, and then we added some poetry to be able to invite the community to that. We've had a number of presentations done to administrations for the benches and the trash cans out on the trail, for our hydroponics unit at the middle school, which if you haven't seen that guy, that's awesome. It's just down the hall. And just recently we had one on solar panels as well, right? So our students are learning public speaking skills infused throughout our curriculum, is just some of the examples of how our graduate profile is starting to come to life. But we got to continue to make those connections, so that's a part of this curriculum revision as well. Another piece is disciplinary literacy. So again, I refer you to your handy vocabulary sheet, but disciplinary literacy is essentially that reading happens in every single classroom in our school systems, and especially when you get to the secondary level and classrooms are more segregated by content area. We want to make sure that all of our teachers feel that they're responsible for reading. It's not just our English teachers who are responsible to help students comprehend and understand what it is that they read. But we also know that students read differently in different classes, right? To read like an economist in your economics class is a different type of reading than when you read like a scientist in your biology class, or when you're reading as a culinary student, right? And so making sure that our teachers are actually learning how to help students read for their content area and comprehend what it is that they're reading, right? If any of us have ever read a recipe before, and like maybe I'm the only one that doesn't understand them very well. I think we've talked about my cooking plenty of times, right? Like it's really important to understand how to read a recipe. And so disciplinary literacy is helping our teachers understand how they too are a teacher of reading. And so Dave will speak a little bit more to that, but he's really our guru when it comes to that practice in our curriculum. As I mentioned, we need to align to the state standards and some of the changes made within those standards, and then have those refinements in our workshop model. So specific to the state standards, as you know, if we were to go to the depth of every standard that we adopt and that we look into, we would have to have students with us for about 23 years. We don't have students for 23 years. We have them for 13 or 14, depending on if they're with us for 4K. And so that means that we need to prioritize the standards that we do have. So when we look at the new state English standards, these are the areas that we have put priority on. So again, emphasizing that phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, and phonics. Also making sure that we understand the differences now in these standards in reading, writing, and speaking for authentic and varied purposes. So previously, the writing standards emphasized narrative and opinion writing. So the students did a lot of narrative writing and opinion writing, and our student representatives can probably talk about how many times they've done narrative writings. And our reading standards were very heavy on informational reading. The new standards in writing really talk about three primary areas of writing: creative, formal, and reflective writing. And there's a better balance between reading literature and informational reading. So bringing a little bit more literature back into the standards. There's also a big emphasis in these standards on inquiry. So really having students ask questions to deepen their understanding, which works really well with our design process, which I did not know what ASA's presentation was tonight, but they queued that up really well. They talked about the launch cycle and the questions they had to ask around self-care. In this example, that's an example of where inquiry, right, students asking those questions about why is something like this, starts to bring to life their learning. This also works super well with our maker spaces and all of the pieces that we've put into our STEAM programs. So with all of that, we're going to dive into actually what were the curricular changes in the curriculum and what does that look like. So before I turn it over to Dave and Robin, what I want to first emphasize is just make sure, because we do have some new board members, and I want to make sure that you have an understanding and a reminder for everybody, because again, you guys see this once a year, the difference that we have between curriculum and resources, because they can sometimes be used interchangeably, but they are pretty distinctly different concepts. So when we talk about the curriculum, we're really talking about the learning criteria from the standards. So we're talking about the standards that we're emphasizing and are choosing to place priority on. From that, our teachers develop units where they identify those standards, the targets, the essential questions, vocabulary assessments, and we make sure that we have a scope and sequence all the way K through 12 that makes sense for a student's learning progression. We archive all of this curriculum in our Rubicon Atlas program, as well as all of our curriculum is available on the website under the Teaching and Learning Department for review. Starting tomorrow, all of the ELA curriculum that is in draft for your review will also be published out there. So if there's any community members that wants to review the curriculum, and along with this presentation, that'll be available starting tomorrow. When we talk about resources, we're talking about the materials that are published from companies or that our teachers create themselves to support the curriculum and the standards. So we talk about two different types of resources: primary resources and supplemental resources. So primary resources are the materials that are relied upon to provide daily lesson support for instruction. And so I'm pretty confident I can say never. I know you're never supposed to say never, but I don't believe that we have one primary resource where we use absolutely everything in it, right? Even within our primary resources, we are making decisions about what best supports the standards. And so that's important to note. Supplemental resources are materials used to extend and support instruction as needed. And so for primary resources in ELA, there's a list that was provided to you, and again, this list will be published on our website starting tomorrow, of the materials. We really only have two new primary resources that are under consideration tonight. Seventh grade is extending to use the Heinemann units of study in reading and writing and phonics, which is what we've been using K-6 for a long time as part of our workshop model. And then this book here, Craft and Process Studies, we're using this as a resource to draw the first unit in K through 5 and to use as a resource for that. So those are the only two new primary resources that are up for consideration. Everything else we've been using for a number of years. So I'm going to turn it over to Robin Wilson, who's going to talk a little bit more specifically about what the curriculum revisions were at the elementary level, K through 5.
Good evening, everyone. Well, as Danielle said, we're going to continue with the workshop model as a primary instructional practice in our reading and writing workshops, as well as the use of the Heinemann units of study in reading, writing, and phonics. Over the last 1920 was the first year. Our K through second grade classes began using the phonics unit of study. So they're eager to wrap up their first full year in being able to use it in an uninterrupted in-person environment to begin to see more of its full effect regarding student developmental phonics awareness. One of the things we focused on as we looked at making some refinements in the workshop model was really looking long and hard at phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, phonics, and word study. And the way they're presented there in the slide is in order of the developmental continuum that children develop proficiency with each of those pieces of sound awareness. So if you think about phonological awareness, those are all of the things a young student can do with regard to sound that doesn't require understanding print. So all of those times you were driving with your little one in the back seat of the car and they were going rat, scat, cat, hat, and other nonsense words that kind of made your eye want to twitch. That was important phonological awareness development that was going to serve them well later as they learned to read. So kudos to every parent who's driven the miles with that going on in the back seat. It's important work they're doing. After that, children begin to develop phonemic awareness, which is beginning to understand things that rhyme or sound alike, being able to clap syllables to word parts and things like that. And then phonics is really when they begin to attach those sounds to print specifically. When we start to think about, what sound does the letter B make, and ask students to start to make that sound and to recognize it in print. So that's an area where we've already begun diligent work in thinking about how to really solidify those important skills in ways that we maybe hadn't as strongly before this curriculum renewal cycle. Another area that you'll see emphasized is the part that comes after that, and that is what we call word study. That encompasses being able to spell a word correctly, but goes farther than that in helping students focus on word parts. Just like when you're reading or writing and coming to a word you haven't seen before, or thinking about how to spell a word you may not be certain of, you think about the parts that you know for sure from use in other words to make decisions about decoding the word you're coming up against. And then also vocabulary development. When we were doing research study, we read more and more about the importance of vocabulary acquisition and formal instruction in the classroom. And so in the beginning, in the middle grades, Sarah Smith has been a key part of putting in a, looking at a vocabulary tool that aligns with the Heinemann resources, so that if a third grade class is reading the book Because of Winn-Dixie, the vocabulary words they're learning about are derived from that book, so that students have a context of what the word means rather than a random obscure word that my teacher back in the day might have chosen. Another element of the refinements at elementary includes reading and writing for very purposes, and I really want to talk more about writing in this regard. One of the things, and it kind of goes along with the third bullet too, that we see as a refinement is looking at the first unit of study that occurs in almost every single grade is the first unit in every grade, kindergarten through 5th, and our goals there are to really take a step back on what historically has been personal narrative. If you have elementary students in the district, you may have heard them talk about small moments where they have to take a small moment from something that happened to them and kind of magnify it and write about it. Not all kids love writing personal narratives, and when they're asked to do it for the first unit every year, it kind of becomes a little bit of drudgery, we felt like, and that's not what we wanted a student's first writing experience in the school year to be. So the craft and process resource that Danielle highlighted allows more student choice for what kind of writing they might do. So they can take a topic they love, for example, let's say ice skating, and think about how they want to write about it and tell about it. And that might be writing something in nonfiction to tell all about ice skating. It might be a made-up story about ice skating, and that's creative writing that's put in the state standards that wasn't part of the Common Core. Or it might be writing a poem about ice skating. So they have a lot more choice in how they want to communicate their ideas. And that's really the idea behind rhetorical writing, that it's more authentic and that they have a clear understanding of who their audience is. Lastly, we're working with teachers on focusing on instructional practices to support students in small groups. So while many of these primary resources might be familiar to our teachers, we've begun to do a lot of work already this year through learning sprints to help teachers have structures to support students in small groups that are designed based upon their needs. As Danielle also highlighted with the kindergarten book box, doing all of this also involves continuous maintenance of our classroom libraries. The books that are in that book box, that child will cycle out once a week. So when you think about a dozen books that costs about $6 or $7 a piece for each kindergartner, and they're going to change them over every week, you're talking a lot of books, which is a wonderful thing. And we've had classroom libraries, and the budget allocation is designed to both maintain those and let us acquire some books that may not have been on the market last go around. The last budget allocation you'll see for elementary is an allocation we've put aside after we are able to review new K-2 units of study that are going to be released by Heinemann in the fall. The timing of their release didn't work out very well for our curriculum renewal, but we wanted to leave ourselves the opportunity to look at and consider this resource for K-2. We've been told that the K-2 resources have a stronger emphasis on phonological awareness and phonics. We welcome that. However, we are also wondering and a little concerned about, does it maintain the level of student choice that we know has helped our students really gravitate to reading when they're able to choose the books they're most interested in to put in their book boxes. So that's one of the question marks we have, but again, want to be able to see the resource before we would commit to it.
Thanks, Robin. And so just on a note of that piece is that while we have a line item in the budget that you'll see in a little bit, if we were to review that and decide that we would want to recommend that, that would be something that would come back to you as a board for approval. So you would have an opportunity to review that impact and that resource prior to us moving forward with that. So now we're going to turn it over to Dave Zindler, who is one of our learning coaches and our literacy specialist at the middle school and high school level.
Hi everybody, my name is David Zindler. I'm a former English department chair here at Pewaukee High School and a current district learning coach.
and Disciplinary Literacy Coordinator. It was 5 years ago, actually, that we stood in front of the board and we introduced the current iteration of our K-12 ELA curriculum that we're currently working under, and the big point of emphasis during that was a shift to a K-12 workshop model. And truth be told, we've had a workshop model for many, many years at the elementary school level, but it was a big instructional shift at the high school level. Through the work that we've done in this current process, we've absolutely affirmed our decision that we made 5 years ago to make that shift to the workshop model. But one of the things that we did discover is there is a natural shift that exists between an elementary workshop and a secondary workshop. And that's what led to, and Danielle laid the groundwork for that in terms of one of our recommendations is the purchase of Heinemann's units of study at grade 7. And it's, Danielle also described the difference between a primary resource and a secondary resource, or supplemental resource, excuse me. And this is really almost going to be like a hybrid of both of those. And what I mean by that simply is we want to purchase the resource for the 7th grade, but it's going to be used more as in a supplemental role for those particular teachers. And what we're looking to do, what happens in a elementary workshop to a secondary workshop, the tenets of workshop remain the same, so that really doesn't change. So there's emphasis on voice and choice in the whole thing. But you start to get more removal of some of the scaffoldings that happen at the elementary school level. And so we're making that shift in the 7th grade to move from elementary model to the secondary model, and that's the reason for the purchase of the Heinemann units of study. Another thing that we're looking to do in terms of our job at the secondary level is we have to provide our students with as many different variety of resources as possible. Resources in terms of reading and resources in terms of writing. In the current system that we're in, our goal is really to make our kids strong readers and strong writers. And it's not strong writers of fill in the blank, strong writers of a 5-paragraph essay, for example. So we want to create writers that are nimble enough that they have the skills that they can transfer those skills to write in any situation that they might be in. In order to make that happen, we have to provide a variety of resources and variety of experiences for those kids to be able to produce that. Another thing, and this is kind of near and dear to my heart, so Danielle talked about disciplinary literacy, and it's so exciting in terms of some of the things that are happening in our school district in terms of other core classes. Science teachers, social studies teachers, they're teaching the skills of reading in their particular core subject areas. Naturally speaking, when we started to really look and dig into the standards, there was a major emphasis placed on nonfiction and informational reading. And we definitely started to include that and worked very hard to include that in all of our classroom libraries that you see in the English Language Arts Department. But truth be told, a lot of that informational reading is done in other subject areas. So in social studies classes, in science classes being two classic examples of that. Just by the nature of what goes on in those classes, you have a lot of informational reading that are happening in there, and that's exactly what should be happening there because that's authentic and relevant reading and writing. As an English language arts teacher, we have to be protectors of fiction. Because if kids don't read fiction in an English language arts class, they may not be exposed to it. So one of the things that we have to do in terms of our curriculum is make sure we provide students not only with memoirs and informational texts, but also a variety of literature that students can read where they can really truly try to dig in. And that work leads to that disciplinary literacy efforts that Danielle already alluded to. We're seeing it all throughout the district. We're seeing it in the high school, we're seeing it in the middle school, and what you're seeing, it really comes down to the what and the how. What I mean by that is the texts are going to differ. So a text in an English language arts class is going to be your novel, it's going to be your memoir, it's going to be an informational text. But if you are a PHYED or a health teacher, we don't want those texts. Kids need to know how to read I'm thinking of Daniel right now. They need to know how to read a food label and how that's going to impact them, and that certainly relates to what we saw earlier in terms of our ACES students as far as their self-care, making good decisions in terms of what it is that they're eating. So they can look at it, but do they know how to actually read it? And that's authentic disciplinary literacy type of reading that we see, for example, in a PE or a health class. In a science class, the texts are going to be different, and the text might be a data table. Students need to be able to look at a data table and be able to draw some inferences and some conclusions from that. So that's the work that we're trying to, and is really blowing up and exploding in terms of all of our different courses. The teachers are really latching onto that. Another thing that both Robin and Danielle mentioned was the importance of vocabulary. We've had a school-wide vocabulary program in the high school since 2014. That's now in the middle school as well. So what that means is if you go into any classroom in the middle school and the high school, you're going to find 5 words that are hanging in pink in every single classroom. And we have teachers, whether a kid is in 6th grade, whether a kid is in 9th grade, whether a kid is in social studies, science, PE, and they're going to see those same words, and teachers are introducing those words, and teachers are using it as part of their instruction, and then we're asking our teachers to ask our students to use those words in part of their discussion and part of their reflective writings that they're doing. And the theory behind that is multiple exposures to those words. It's almost like eating broccoli, where you have to have your kids eat it 7 times before they really start to like it. So when a student goes from one class to another and they see and experience those same words over the course of a week, their level of understanding and level of use of that word is going to change. So while a word on the very first day might be, I've never even seen that word before, by the end of the week, not only have they seen that word, but they've experimented with it, and they can recognize and perhaps even how to use it. So there's a continuum in terms of familiarity with the vocabulary, and we see that as part, bless you, and we see that as part of our vocabulary program. It's very exciting. And continuing to maintain and improve the text collection, we looked at the box of a kindergartner. Can I roll out the?
Sure.
All right. Hang on one second.
Dave too has a visual for us.
Larger visual.
It's convenient that his office is right there.
So as part of the budget that Danielle is going to introduce, classroom library, or every English language arts teacher is requesting money for their classroom libraries, and it's anywhere between $500 and $600 per year. What you see right here on this cart, the top row and the bottom row, is you see what about $500 to $600 will add to a classroom library. The kids don't go through the books nearly as fast as they do at the kindergarten level. If any of you have high school students, you might know that books get lost sometimes and don't get returned and everything of that nature, so we also have that we have to factor in. But this is an example of the type of books that we'd be, in essence, supplementing all of our classroom libraries with over the course of the next several years. So.
Yeah, just to expand a little bit on the vocabulary program, Dave's going to actually continue to build that vocabulary program and expand it. Anybody that has had middle and high schoolers in the last few years may have heard of the resource Membean. Usually it is not used in a favorable light with our students. So we will not be using Membean further in 6th through 12, but rather we're going to be building a vocabulary program that accomplishes some of the same learning, but in a more engaging and authentic way for our students. So I don't know how much the word has gotten out to our students on that one yet, but I expect that to be a pretty positive. It's certainly positive in my household. I know that when I told my children about that piece. So then, just to move on to our budget, I have further budget details if anybody wants to review those in the next couple of weeks. But tonight, I'm just going to highlight some of the bigger buckets of the budget. So overall, we're looking at a budget around $158,000. Just to put that in perspective, that's kind of middle to upper end of where our curriculums usually lie. Career and tech ed, math, science usually are our most expensive curriculums. English and social studies then usually come in right around this spot, and then some of our other areas can vary based on their needs. So when we actually look and break down what the budget kind of buckets are, when we look at the elementary level, you'll see that the largest bucket is for classroom libraries and book room texts. We've now mentioned multiple times tonight the need to continue to grow our classroom libraries. And so that's what that allocation is for. So this is for $600 to $750 per teacher at our elementary schools for K through 5, I should say. The next budget item is a 5-year subscription to Words Their Way. Robin mentioned that Sarah had worked on used a phonics resource to align that with our units of study. And so that's been Words Their Way. We've used it for the last few years. It's also our spelling program that we do have. We do have intentional spelling programs. And so this is the 5-year cost for that. We like to, in our curriculum process, purchase resources for the 5 years of the curriculum whenever possible so that we don't have those annual costs, which, as we all know, sometimes change based on inflation and so this is able to lock us in at a more affordable rate. Robin mentioned those revised K through 2 units of study. So this is, again, that line item that we're holding. If we review those K2 units of study and decide that those aren't the right fit for us, that would then be money that we would not be spending on that. But if it is indeed something that we would want to move forward, again, we would bring that back to the board with those proposed revisions and that resource for review. So that's just a sitting line item for now. And then about $7,100 for mentor texts and teacher resources. So if you get the chance to review the primary resource list, you'll see that there's a link on that document that links out to a spreadsheet that has multiple tabs on it. And again, this will be on the Teaching and Learning website starting tomorrow. But we have lists of whole class texts that our teachers use. So these are texts that our teachers use to teach a specific skill or concept. So for example, metaphors, right? We might read a book to the class that shows really good examples of metaphors, and then we're going to ask our students to either identify metaphors in the books that they're reading or go write and using metaphors. And so we use mentor texts regularly to be able to highlight those types of skills that we're teaching to. So we have a list of what we call whole class texts attached to that primary resource document. That spreadsheet will be updated annually. And so that's not an item that the board takes action on, but in full transparency, we want to make sure that you have the ability to see anything that is going to be introduced to the whole class for a specific learning strategy. And so that's what that resource is as well. And then just a few various teacher resources to support their learning as well. When we look at the secondary level, mentor text and teacher resources is similar, but again, like the elementary, so the smallest bucket up there. Dave mentioned classroom libraries and book club choice texts. So again, that's $500 to $600 per classroom, right? We have 9 ELA teachers at the middle school. We have 7, I'm looking at Maggie, 8 at the high school, right? So we have 15 total at our secondary level. We have 9 or 10 at each grade level for K through 5, which is why you see the price difference, right? You just multiply out that amount of classroom libraries. And then at the secondary level, some technology resources and digital subscriptions. So again, some 5-year subscriptions to some resources that we've been using or that we're looking to acquire as supplemental resources. And so that bucket has a few different items in it. So the last piece that I want to talk about before we go to questions is just our text selection process. And so obviously we've mentioned it multiple times tonight, but student choice is a cornerstone of our model. So a student choice whenever possible. So one of the things that comes along with student choice is always encouraging parents to make sure that they know what their child is reading. And so we're constantly encouraging parents to ask their child, what are they reading? So that if there is any concern with that, we can get that child a different text, because almost always it's going to be a choice text for the student. But that being said, we still have some criteria in place to make sure that our collections, as well as what students are choosing, are as appropriate as possible. So I mentioned the whole class text list that will be updated annually and posted on the website for parents in the community to review. We do have selection criteria policy that you're aware of in 6500-06 as well as 6500-07, which does include a process to request review. If there's an instructional material of any kind in any classroom, not just English classrooms, that is of concern. For a number of years already, in grades 6 through 12, we have a communication expectation of our staff that they will inform parents via email at the start of the semester if there is any teacher-selected whole class novel length text. So for example, my son in Honors English 9 read Romeo and Juliet this year, so his teacher at the start of the semester informed us that that's one of the texts that they're going to be reading. So that, again, any parent with concerns about a text can follow up with the teacher either for more details or have an alternate text supplied with plenty of notice, because that comes out at the start of each semester. Again, that's been happening for many years already. There are a number of classes, I will say, 6 through 12, especially at the high school, that just don't have whole class novel length text. So if that hasn't been communicated, it's simply because there isn't any in many of our classes. So then beyond that, beyond the criteria that you as a board has established, and some of the expectations we've had in place for a number of years, as part of this review process, our curriculum team developed additional text selection criteria for whole class texts. I already mentioned what whole class texts are used for. Is really for making sure that we can highlight a specific skill that we want our students to learn. And so beyond the board criteria, we also want to make sure that we're considering these questions as we're selecting texts in our classrooms, right? So we're looking at authors' crafting techniques. Is it engaging text for the students? Is the topic relevant? Is whatever that we're planning to teach, is it well crafted and highlighted in that text? Obviously, why would we choose a text if we're trying to teach a skill and it's not actually done well in the text? But is there additional credence to the value of the text? Has it won awards? What are the reviews on it? So our teachers are looking at all of that in addition to the criteria established in board policy. When texts are selected, obviously the teacher is the first level of review for that when they go to make purchases. Then typically it goes to one of our literacy coaches who does a review as well, and then I, myself or Robin, review the lists as well. All that to be said, we don't read every book. That would be an impossibility for us to do. So that's not to say that at some point something couldn't get through that, upon further review we wouldn't necessarily choose and doesn't fit the criteria. But it does go through lots of layers of consideration, before it gets into the hands of students. But again, if there is ever a concern, we have policy in place for community members and parents to bring that up to the teacher first and then up the chain of command as needed. So just to review then what our next steps are for this curriculum, as I've mentioned, everything will be on the Teaching and Learning website for the community, if interested, starting tomorrow. The primary resources are available for review in my department by appointment with me, so feel free if you want to look at all of the materials to set an appointment with me within the next couple of weeks before you take action on the curriculum. Again, just the new primary resources, which again is just grade 7, and this text here for 1 unit in grades K through 5. And then we do have a professional development plan in place starting this summer to bring in different professionals, including the author of this text, to be able to provide some professional development. He'll be coming here, and we have a couple of different activities. And then throughout, certainly next year as well, we'll be deploying professional development for staff to implement these changes with fidelity and make sure that their learning goes along with it. So that's a whole lot of information, not to mention the 600 plus pages of curriculum for you to review, but myself and the team would welcome any questions that you may have at this time.
Well, before we get to the questions, let's go back to the team and introduce folks. They spent 2 years working very hard on this, so they need to get some acknowledgement for that effort. Thank you.
So this will be a good test, right, to see if I can do this. So we have Robin Wilson, and then next to Robin is Maggie Ganier. Maggie is our high school department chair. Sarah Smith is next to her. She is at Horizon as one of our learning coaches. You heard from Dave Zindler tonight, our learning coach at PHS. Rebecca Regals is next to him. She's in 8th grade, representative of our ELA department. Then in the second row in the pink jacket is Liz Edwards. She's one of our 4th grade teachers. Cheryl Panka is next to her. You've probably seen Cheryl in years past. She was a learning coach for many years and is now one of our 4K teachers. Carrie Rodolfi is new to us this year. She replaced Cheryl as our learning coach and is a parent in the district as well. Emily Jusela, next to her, is ELA rep from ASA as well, and Katie's just there to visit. Spadoni from ASA. So those are our reps that are here tonight.
Again, thanks for coming tonight too, so I appreciate that. I'm opening it up for questions.
I guess I'll start with one. I guess I'll direct this to Maggie. I heard Danielle talk about a focus on inquiry, more focus on inquiry. Does inquiry include the topic of literacy writing around research? I mean, I'm not sure where research fits in terms of writing styles.
Yeah.
So could you talk to that a little bit?
Yes. Yes.
I hope so.
Yeah, so I am an AP Lang teacher as well as an English 11 teacher, and actually right now English 11 is really focused in on their research component. They're researching historical events that happened using community voices and creating podcasts that are research-based. So they are asking questions about moments of history that they think need to be highlighted, especially community-based stories that need to be highlighted and told before they're lost. And so there's a lot of really great interviews that have been happening, as well as supporting that with academic research. So they also have annotated bibliographies and structured outlines to be created and used in class as well that turn that writing into what I would consider authentic and relevant writing as well. So turning that outline into a podcast instead of potentially a research paper, which is a little bit different.
Yeah. So Maggie does the upper end, of our ELA curriculum, but research is actually a piece that we looked at specifically, and in this new curriculum infused starting in 7th grade. There was not much, I'll look to Dave, but there was not much research instruction taking place prior to the high school that was very intentional as far as how to build a student's research skills. And so 7th grade now will be where they really get that first robust research instruction and expectations laid out for them, so that'll scaffold all the way up then.
Thanks.
Larry? Sorry, Danielle. Tonight's question night, right? So one of the things, and again, either anybody from the group that participated in this, we know that 3rd grade reading level is kind of like that milestone benchmark kind of thing. Real brief, real short, can you give me some kind of a brief overview of how the curriculum helps to make sure that our students are at that 3rd grade reading level or help to get there?
Yeah, and Robin, feel free if you have anything to add to this, but as we said, as Robin kind of explained the different levels that students go through in order to get to reading, by the time they're in 3rd grade, they really should be a proficient reader as far as their, some of their decoding skills is one of the key ones, and that's one of those grade level markers that we do take a look at. It does obviously continue as they get to more robust vocabulary in decoding as they go through the elementary, but some of those basic tenets should be in place by 3rd grade, and so that's one of the indicators and why, again, with this curriculum, we're looking at making sure that phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, and phonics is more deeply embedded and addressed. But Robin, do you want to add anything to that? You know 3rd grade well.
Sure. I would just add that that's why we have the primary resource for phonics in K2, because we know how important that is to have a firm foundation in being able to decode unknown words and encode when writing, and then comprehension is a skill that runs alongside the decoding in K2, but then certainly takes off beyond those basic skills of reading foundations that exist in K2. So that's when we talked about that strong increased emphasis with phonics in K2, that's the rationale for why, because 3rd grade is really when students go from not just learning to read, but reading to learn, and that door opens more widely to them.
I like that little quote, by the way. So I have 3 or 4 questions. So one of the things you had with the little books that you had in terms of what's there, what have you seen or experienced relative to the combination now that we've had the 4K classrooms and the 5K relative to the books and the number of books that they're churning through? Is it how much is it going up, or is it?
Yeah, they're still churning through the same kind of volume of books, but what has been the biggest thing we've seen at 4K and 5K is our need to have texts that are specific to the themes that we've identified. That was a piece that, Robin and I were both a bit frustrated by when we first, moved to the 4K model is that we had, dinosaur books coming out of our ears, but we had very little on the polar region, and yet that was a theme that we had identified, and same with a 5K as we've moved into science and social studies carts based on themes there. We've heard that a lot from our 5K teachers most recently of like, can we get more texts that are specific to the themes that we have identified in science and social studies? So definitely a need for more nonfiction texts in those areas. And so that's why actually in the budget, 4K and 5K have $750, whereas the other grades have like $600 because we just need to enhance those. Plus, again, there's so little, you got to have a lot of them.
And John approved that, I hope, or is approving that?
Well, you guys are the ones that approve it, the board does.
But I think
then John has no choice.
But that's an important concept in terms of what's there. I mean, we're investing in the 4K, 5K. We want them to have exposure to these books. But if it's harder to get the books that align with the theme, oh, there she's got them on that side.
That's our
yeah.
$600.
Okay.
$600 worth of books for a third grade classroom.
Yeah, okay. The 4K. But I mean, that's one of the challenges, right? I mean, if either the content or the number of books are now out there, but how do we continue to build off of what we've got in our 4K, 5K? And that's the point I was trying to make with that. So the other one, and this is a couple opinion questions in terms of what's there. So one of the things you've referenced a lot, and as we get in terms of more middle school, high school, choice of reading materials. Why is that important to us, and how do we make sure that that's being done, I guess, in an effective kind of way where student and parents have that opportunity to be participants in that selection of the choice of reading?
Yeah, well, I think we can all remember probably that time period where, unless you are an absolute avid reader, you've probably gone through streaks in your life where you are not reading and as engaged with reading, especially reading for enjoyment, as you once were, and especially as, life gets busier as you get older, and you're required to do a lot more reading that's required of you, like in content in classrooms or, for all of us, our jobs, right? You start to maybe not necessarily become as an engaged reader as you once were. And so being able to have students have choice in what they are selecting keeps them engaged in the reading process in different ways. And I think that was when we shifted to the workshop model. And again, I'll look to our high school, I'll look to Dave and Maggie, who can and our middle school staff who can talk about the fact that when we shifted to the workshop model, kids were selecting and choosing to read instead of being forced to read. And so that has continued. And so that's really what we see is just that love of reading has actually maintained for some students.
Larry, this is such a great book, and I encourage all of you to check out this book if you haven't had a chance to check out this book. The book is entitled I Am the Messenger. It's by Marcus Zuzak. And when I first read this book, Larry, the beginning of the book, I was struggling to really connect to it, but then there was this moment in the book where this character really sort of spoke to me, and I could just kind of envision what he was doing, and then I was completely locked into this particular book. And then as the book started to proceed, when it got to the end, this is the most mind-blowing ending of a book you've ever experienced in your entire life.
Okay, now you're like, okay.
But Larry, if that doesn't do it for you, if you like dogs, Marley, and so
Yeah.
this is, we sell books. That's what we do at the secondary level. And truth be told, I have, as Danielle said, you can't read every single book. We try to read as many books as we can, but you can't read every single one. This is a favorite book of mine. That's actually why I put it on the shelf here. But there are places that I can go that I can find out just enough about this book, and I know that there's a little bit of gambling in this book, and a kid just got back, or his parents just got back from Vegas and went to the Kentucky Derby, and Dad put down $5, and the kid won $800 because it was 80-to-1 odds or something of that nature, and that might be the connection that we have with the book because
we won't worry about the math. He's an English guy.
But 80-to-1, we all get that.
That's how you get kids to connect with. So we connect with books because the fact of the matter is not every kid is going to like the same thing. So we work really, really hard to know who our kids are, know the books that are in our classroom, and put them in a situation where they can experience it.
That's actually what I wanted to ask a question about, is how do you work with the teachers in the classrooms to inspire that interest in the fiction area? Because you said it's really important to grow the interest in fiction reading. So how do you talk about how you do that a little bit, or maybe some?
Yeah, can I speak to that a little
Absolutely,
bit too?
anyone.
Because I teach 8th grade, and eighth graders, I absolutely love them. I've been working with them for 20, I don't know how many years. It's been a really long time. But many 8th graders are avid readers, and that's great. But many 8th graders will be the ones who hide, and they'll tell their parents, oh, I read it at school, so I don't have to read at home, and and they get a little bit, what I'm really proud of in our curriculum is that when we use that gradual release model, we're always asking the kids, yes, you read this short story with us, and now you know what symbolism is, and we've practiced it, and we've talked about it, but now go in your own book and find it. And that is helping with that whole lifelong reader thing, because it's teaching them that all this stuff actually matters. Everything is out there, and it matters, and the human condition matters, and how we treat each other matters, and seeing how characters treat each other matters, and applying it to your own book is so powerful. Also allowing the voice and choice you can take. I'm thinking right now, I've got a young lady who actually just had her initial IEP meeting for some reading issues, and she was able to take some graphic novels that were actually written for adults and find all of these skills in it, and is so proud of herself. And let me tell you, she has moved from, I think, the 7th percentile on the STAR reading test up to the 52nd percentile. And a lot of that just has to do with choice. And like Dave said, we haven't read all of them, but we sell it. We have found it, and we will say, hey, this might not be your cup of tea, but take a look at this book. And anytime, if one of you said right now, well, what would you recommend for me? I would say, tell me the best book that you think you've ever read, and then also tell me the worst, and I can get you 5 titles right now that you might like. So that to me is just, I love when we committed to classroom libraries years ago. I love being able to offer these kids, and I love that the kids are able to come up to us and say, I'm 40 pages into this book, I hate it. No problem. Let's find you something, because that's what we do as adults, isn't it? Why would we as an adult ever read something that we don't enjoy? That's ridiculous. So we want to teach our kids this is what lifelong reading really does look like, that you get to choose what you read, you get to connect to it, and you get to discuss it with people.
So you can sense the passion that our teachers have for this, right? But I will say to the process, as far as your question, Steve, is that we don't have to convince our teachers to sell the books to kids, right? And to help them find their passions, they have that on their own. But they also do a ton of collaborating with each other, that if they have a kid in their classroom who loves sports, and they themselves aren't an avid reader of sports texts, right? They might go down the hall and find somebody. So collectively, we're constantly saying, I have a kiddo who's interested in this. What do you guys know about it? Who has something that might be a good fit for them? So there's a lot of that happens as well.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah.
Danielle, when you look at this curriculum and compare it to what we currently have, is there an area that you say there is the most profound change from what we're currently doing, and that change, what will be the impact to learning?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think the most profound change is going to be the stronger emphasis on the phonics and phonemic awareness in the direct reading instruction that's happening. And so, again, I think the impact on learning for that is that those are core foundational skills that our students need to have. And so for us to be more intentional, we were already intentional about it, but even more focused on it, I believe, is going to build that foundation for students in a more robust way, which obviously as they age through the system, we're going to see that continue to deepen as well.
One, thank you for helping to clarify about the books that are out there engaging the students, but in the back of my head, I keep thinking that there's so many more alternatives that are out there today versus a few years ago, if you will, in the sense of the videos and games and other sorts of things that students can pick up on their iPhones or their iPads and be able to use and access instantly, whereas a book, you might have to go to the library to get it, or you have to go to someplace and actually try to buy a book and some of those kinds of things, which is tougher to deal with. The other one, and I have to make sure that I make a mention of this, and maybe Robin Wilson, because I know she's done it at least 2, maybe 3 times, the book of the year presentations that you do. Who wants to talk about that, and what does that do for the kids that are in our elementary schools?
Board meeting, big deal. So I'm new to PLE this year as a learning coach, and it has been absolutely amazing. And right when I signed on, Brian Siegel said, Book of the Year, you inherited that. And I said, okay. I was fortunate as a parent. I have a second grader and a 4K, so especially in our virtual world, I got to see the Book of the Year as they put it out to families that way. So I knew the hype. I knew my oldest coming home, super excited about books. So really what it is, and Cheryl, as the past literacy coach, myself and Sarah Gall, the amazing librarian, kind of just pour over books that we think would be good candidates for this. It started way in September, and then I think we made our decisions by January. The fun thing about it is it's top secret. Teachers, we don't let anybody know what it is. Slide into Brian Siegel's office. What do you think? And, you know, everybody puts their eyes on it, and then it's a book matchup. So really, it's books going head to head. There was 8 books in all, and we had a lot of excitement for it. Sarah Smith helped us create character trading cards this year. So the main character, there was a card on the back. We wrote some funny blurbs to pull in teachers, obviously a little comedy there, but for kids, so they were trading those throughout the process. And then as the voting comes down to it, obviously there's going to be a Book of the Year. There's also Best Character and Best Illustrations. This year was really special because we got to use the auditorium here, talk about a bunch of kids. There was only 6 seats left, so we just made it. But then all the encore teachers step in, and they wear costumes as the characters. They were all on stage, and then there's like the big reveal. But really, Sarah and I kind of looked at each other and we're like, they're all screaming about books. You know, that can't be a bad thing. And if you're ever in the library, this just happened about 2 weeks ago. That's what they're asking for at library checkout. You know, they're flying off the shelves. So really, it's getting kids engaged. It's giving them the opportunity to find more books, maybe by that author. And just books are fun, and we love them. So that's Book of the Year.
Thank you for the explanation on that. That's great. That's it.
Anybody else? Okay, we've got 2 weeks to dig deeper if you'd like. Make sure you send any questions to Danielle, and then it'll be back next time for approval. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the Policy Committee. I'm going to turn it over to Jeannie.
Okay, I may ask Danielle for help on this one too. Policy number 5200.09 is a new policy, and it's on high school alternative education. And they've come up with, Danielle and her group have come up with some different ways for students who are probably at risk for one reason or another, or come into our district later and are at risk because of that they can actually get a high school diploma through Pewaukee.
Yes, so I sent a fairly detailed memo, and I know that I answered some questions from some of you, so I'm happy to take any questions that you have, but essentially what we're looking to have in policy is the addition of the competency diploma, which is an altogether different way. State law allows for us to have that, and we can define that, which I gave you those materials to review as far as how we're starting to define that. But it's a little bit of a cart versus a horse situation in that in order to move forward with the final and firm development of the program, we need to have policy in place to know that we can move forward with that. But to have policy in place, I needed to be able to provide you enough background to be able to understand what it was that we're attempting to do. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I apologize for not sending you before. Is the alternative competency-based diploma a Pewaukee high school diploma?
Mm-hmm. It's a state of Wisconsin high school diploma.
Okay.
Yeah, it's issued by the state of Wisconsin.
Okay, so I think that was.
But it is a full high school diploma versus like a GED or HSED.
So I think the language that's in the actual policy might be confusing. What confused me? So 5200.09. I thought it said it was may earn. It says it. I thought it said it may earn a Pewaukee High School alternative diploma by demonstrating proficiencies in the subject.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we can change that to like Wisconsin.
Okay.
State. Yeah.
Okay,
That makes sense.
thank you very much
Yep,
for
that's a good
answering
catch.
my question.
Anything else on that one? With that correction, then it'll be in the consent agenda for next time.
Okay. Policy number 3100.05 was income disposable district-owned equipment and supplies. This was up for review and we made no changes to it. And I got no questions on it.
Okay, be on the consent agenda then.
Policy number 3100.06 was also just up for review and we made no changes to this. If you have any questions, ask John.
You were cruising, weren't you?
Yeah, we were on a roll. 3300.07 fund balance, again, was up for review, and we just made a minor change because before we were striving toward a minimum. Well, we've actually met the minimum, so we need to keep it.
Great update. I think it's smart, the way you updated that.
Nobody else? All right, be next time.
Policy number 6400.01, curriculum. This was up for review. We made minor changes. You can see at the top, we put it in Wisconsin state regulations, just to make it clear. And then in the third paragraph, we put a little more description in there so you could actually understand what we were talking about when we were talking about learning targets or performance expectations.
Everybody good? Okay.
Policy number 3900.10, Narcan. And I was on, when we wrote this in the very beginning, we spent a lot of time on it. And what we wrote the first time around really seemed to hold up, so we pretty much kept it the same as it was. The only thing that we changed is that we're going to implement, in accordance with the Department of Public Instruction guidelines, to implement such a plan, which we did.
Looking around, everybody good?
Okay? And that was it.
All right.
Excellent.
Thank you. That brings us down to.
Brian, we were working on,
yes?
7100.03, I think it is, the evaluation process, and just didn't quite come to a consensus on it yet.
Okay, you knocked the easy ones off first.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, it'll be on next time. It brings us down to personnel issues. So we have some resignations. You want to walk us through there?
Yeah, so we have 3 resignations. I could take questions, otherwise seek your approval. Todd Whalen, high school math teacher. Nicole Ziegler, 4th grade teacher from Horizon. And Tricia Berge, special education teacher at Horizon Elementary.
Are there any questions with this?
Is there a motion to
How we take all 3 at once with a motion?
move to accept the resignations of Todd Whalen, Tricia Berge, and Nicole Ziegler?
Ziegler.
What's that?
Ziegler.
Ziegler,
As presented.
as presented.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? 7-0. All right.
All right, we have multiple employments for you to look at, and we've had hiring teams doing a lot of really good work here, so.
Anybody have an objection to go through these and then make one motion for all of them? That good?
Seems good.
So, as you will recall, Brenton Roberts is taking a new position in the Muskego School District. So, after a hiring process, Michelle Dolby, she goes by Shelley, has been recommended as our new Pewaukee High School Dean of Students. She's also a parent in the district. Jenna Condon is our recommendation for 4th grade at Horizon Elementary, along with Haley Splan, 4th grade teacher at Horizon Elementary. Amber Schmitz, speech pathologist at Horizon and Asa Clark. Veronica Sargent, speech pathologist at Horizon and Asa Clark. And then a flash from the past coming back here, which will be related to a leave request that we'll talk about subsequently. Karen Mendez, physical education teacher, who would be coming in on a limited term position for the 2nd and 3rd quarter for next year. I've interviewed all of these individuals myself and find them to be of very high quality, so I'd recommend your approval, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Before we look for a motion, any questions with any of these individuals? I guess it's motion time.
All right. I move to accept these positions
As presented?
as presented.
Thank you. All right, second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
You're on the boards. And then we have a leave of absence request.
We do, and this is related to, again, the situation with bringing Karen Mendez in for the limited term. So Mike Basili, high school physical education teacher, is requesting, this is a little bit of a unique situation, but it worked out really well. He worked with Karen to come in for quarters 2 and 3. So in essence, Mike would be taking a leave of second and third quarter of the school year. He would be teaching the first and the fourth quarter. This really relates to, if you're familiar with Mike's son, who, and he's now going to be playing basketball at Virginia Tech, and Mike would like to be able to enjoy this part of his life and watch his son play basketball without conflict with work, and he was able to work this out with Karen. So, so I would seek your approval of the leave request of Mike Basili for quarters 2 and 3 of next year.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? 7-0. Thank you for that. Any other things under personnel?
That would be it.
Okay. All right, let's go down to board goals and operations, upcoming activities. Julie provides you a little update of all the crazy things going on in all the schools here at the end of the year. I think the biggest ones we need to work with as a board, 8th grade promotion. Hopefully we can have some people come to that. Of course, there's the honors banquet. That's always a good recognition of all the hard work our students put in. And then we have the June 10th graduation. So people know, is everybody going to be able to be there on June 10th?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. How about the 8th grade promotion, June 8th?
I'll be there.
Okay, fantastic. And who's all going to Kiwanis? Okay, you guys know about that?
The honors.
Honors banquet, yeah.
Honors banquet.
Okay. All right, fantastic.
But it's at a different location this year, though. It's at
Silver Spring,
Right.
yeah. Yeah. And we have strategic planning.
Yep, and
Next
it's
Monday.
on the 16th. Thank you for jumping in
Yes.
with that one.
Just a note, continuing with planning on the strategic plan, how that's going to work next Monday. We'll be getting more information out to attendees. We communicated last week. We had a few that said they couldn't make it, but we still have a nice high number. We're north of 120 participants. We'll start in the our auditorium, and then we'll do rotations with the 6 work systems, and that's all going to be in the STEAM Innovation Center at ASA. So we'll walk down the hall, and there will be a rotation between 6 spaces right next to us over here. So a little more detail to come, but we'll be getting that out in the next day or 2.
All right. What's that?
The diploma things on the high school graduation?
You want to ask?
Yeah, I'm assuming, Stacy, you're going to be there, right?
I would like to hand out diplomas if
Yes.
that's okay.
I mean, I could be part of a rotation, but I don't need to be the main one. But
I may have to do a little, if there's someone special coming up, Larry.
We usually schedule that pretty well.
Yeah.
It's handled pretty deftly.
We figure where they are in the stack. Yeah.
Yes.
We'll all learn that Stacy knows how to box out real fast.
I don't want to even go there with it. End up on off the stage somewhere. Who knows, you know? But yeah, if there's 3 of us, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be the whole thing, but glad to be a part of it. So
Excellent.
I think that any other meetings or anything, Larry, anything important from SWSA that we need to worry
no,
about?
other than we have a brand new executive director replacing Terry Phillips. So that was a hire we made either last week, I think.
Yeah.
So she's coming in with some background from the state of Illinois as a superintendent. lots of good experience from that standpoint, and we actually have a sort of initial transition meet and greet meeting tomorrow morning with Terry and that group, and then we'll do an actual in-person in June, hopefully, with that. So that'll be at the Elmwood School District, I think, in June 14th-ish, something out there, so.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I had for that. We also have on here legislative advocacy update. I really don't have much to share tonight. Does anybody else?
John, do you have anything?
Nothing additional.
No, there's not a whole lot. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think that one note you put in the memo, though, was that the ESSER plan got approved, right? So that was something important for the state of Wisconsin to get finalized.
That was really important, Steve. Thanks for bringing that up, that the final approval of the remaining ESSER funds was, so now that gives John some knowns to work with versus having to guess on some of that.
All right. And then it takes us down to election of board positions, officer positions. There's a memo that goes along with it. You guys see a whole stack of things at your desk there. The blues are the nominating forms, and the green are the voting ballots. You have anything to say?
Yeah, so there's a process that reflects Board Policy 7100.07 that was outlined for you. So in order of office, beginning with president, then vice president, then treasurer, then clerk, begins with board members submitting nominating ballots. The process that's recommended here is that Danielle is the collector of those ballots. So she would collect those, and then she would report out who's been nominated. And then subsequently, then you use your voting ballots to vote for your candidate of choice. Danielle would collect those and report the results. The nominating ballots as well as the election ballots are certainly available for your review if you would like to look at those after she makes her report. The individual receiving a majority of the board vote is elected to the office. So a election requires a minimum of 4 votes so that it is a majority of the quorum of the board. And then we proceed that way through each of the 4 offices. The new officers assume those positions at the next regular meeting. So, and as we kind of wrote in here, we wanted to make sure that there was consensus on the process before we move forward.
So everybody grab their first nominating ballot, the president one, and fold it in half. And if you're ready, Danielle will come by and
Can I
pick
ask
it
a
up.
question?
Yes, Jane.
So I'd like to know can I know who's interested in what when it comes to nominating? Like,
Well, what happens is if you nominate somebody and they don't want to be involved, they can
decline.
refuse.
they can decline. Okay.
Yeah.
But nobody can say, hey, I'd like to do this? Or
You can, you can choose. There's nothing preventing that discussion. If you would choose, if you want to have that discussion as a board, you certainly can. This is your process. That certainly, there's nothing in the policy that would prohibit having that kind of discussion.
I mean, I can see who the current officers are, and obviously, I don't really want to be an officer yet, but I mean, but there's other members of the board that have been here, so I just was curious if anyone would like to say, or if they want to stay where they're at, or.
You can certainly have that
Board clerk
discussion.
is fine with me, so I'm okay with that.
I'll serve any position.
I mean, I think I've spoke to Brian, and he said he's served all of them at one point, and so just willing, but I was just curious.
Steve? You wanna
Happy
say?
to serve.
I'll serve wherever.
Yep. It's not about us. It's about the kids.
Okay. Good question, Jane. Any other discussion? All right, well then if you would like to do your nomination ballot for president, then Danielle can come around and collect those, and we'll go from there.
Oh, wait,
Oh,
hang on.
Jane.
Jane, did you screw up?
There's multiples.
Yeah, I saw, I think
Yeah.
that's why I'm confused.
Well, if it says treasurer on it, we know it's yours.
Yeah.
It says vice president.
Just Danielle will know.
Yeah, just almost, so just,
Yeah.
vice president one, or on president one.
Use the president one and just write vice on it.
She's got multiples.
Exactly.
She's good.
There's lots of them.
So you
Yeah,
know,
I
it's
got,
just.
I got it now, I got it. Yeah.
Nope, no problem, Jean. Thank you.
All right, we have, we're gonna do it this way so I don't have to keep walking around. We have nominations for Steve Dankert and Brian Cammers.
Now it's the green ballot with, that says president.
Take it down.
Take it.
So we have a 4-3 vote for Steve Dankert.
Congratulations, Steve. Okay,
So the next one up is going to be the nominating ballot for the vice president.
All right, we have nominations for Brian Cammers, Stacy Newcomer, and Jeannie Wattoon. So we have 4 votes for Stacy Newcomer, 2 for Brian Cammers, and 1 for Jeannie Wattoon.
Congratulations, Stacy. All right, next would be treasurer.
We have nominations for Jeannie Wattoon and Brian Cammers.
Thank you.
7-0 vote for Brian Cammers.
Congratulations, Brian. And for clerk.
The only nominee we have is Larry Dukes.
Do we need to take a vote at that point?
Well, yeah, your
Technically,
policy,
it's
your
gotta be
policy
a
does say
quorum,
you need to
right?
submit a vote.
It's gotta be a majority vote.
And your policy says you can only vote for people who are nominated.
What do we call it when we like assign somebody to be delegate? We had a term for that. Just-
7-0 for Larry Dukes.
Thank you all for your support on that. Much appreciated.
Congratulations, Larry.
Thanks, Larry.
So they will be taking over their positions at the next meeting, which is May 23rd. So, and then, comments from citizens, Julie? No cards, okay. I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Who got that? Okay, all in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we are adjourned.